Welcome to the Pat Sheranian Show. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are really pleased to be on KHQN 1480 on your AM dial. Or if you're watching us on the internet, you're on pat.utahvalleylive.com. And my guest today is Sarah Hinze. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you.
And she has come to join us today from Arizona.
Mesa, Arizona.
Mesa, Arizona. So welcome to the Utah Valley area. How's that? I know it's not new to you. You've been here before, but we love to have you back.
Thank you.
And I want to thank our sponsor today also. Of course, that's Kyani, Kyani. And if you'd like to look up, it's kyani.net. That's one way to find me and find out what we're doing with Kyani. I love it. I no longer have high blood pressure, high cholesterol. I don't have arthritis pain anymore. And I was diabetic for 14 years, and that's all over with. In fact, it's been over with for 14 months from the very beginning of taking these products. They have been a wonderful blessing in my life, and I would wish that for your life. So if you'd like information, please call 801-362-9552, 801-362-552. And if you are an athlete, could I recommend one of these products in particular? It's our Nitro FX and our Nitro Extreme. They're sister products, and they will give you energy with normal. They're everything in them, absolutely natural products, and you'll have energy like you won't believe. And you've been around me long enough to know that if without these products, I wouldn't be here today. But they have all three changed my life, and I really do have more energy than sometimes I know what to do with. So, I met Sarah last summer at the LDS Booksellers Convention in Salt Lake. Where were we? We were at Southtown?
Yes, in Sandy.
Mm-hmm. And just had an invitation to go by a new friend by the name of Boyd Tuttle. And he is a publisher and has published a number of books for us, and we have authors that have come and gone. And are we on the air? Okay, good. A lot of commotion going on, and I'm curious to know what's happening. So that's good to know. Sarah was there with a new book, and we met and had an opportunity to chat a little bit. And you've written other books. Do you have them with you today? Do you have any of them with you, or you just tell us about them?
I have some of them with me, not in this very place.
Okay.
But I have been writing books on unborn children and pre-birth experiences for almost 20 years now. And I was fortunate to have one book sell to Simon & Schuster in New York. And so with that book, I had a lot of opportunity for media and lecturing in new and exciting places.
You want to just tell us a little bit about that? Is it still out there?
Coming from the Light is still available on Amazon, and it was republished by Spring Creek Publishing, and it's called We Live in Heaven.
So new title.
A new title, a new cover. But that book was kind of the premier introduction to many, many people on the national and international level about the philosophy of pre-existence. Pre-existence has been around for a long time and was taught, down through the centuries and has been taught in the ancient texts. But my approach was to collect stories of people who'd had experiences with their unborn children, and these are spiritual kinds of visitations for them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I want to hear about some of those.
Well, I'll be glad to tell you.
I thought you might. Let me have your book that you've got for our viewing audience. It's this new book just came. It's wet off the press this week, right? I mean, it is brand new off the press. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned Boyd Tuttle's name, and he owns a company, a digital publishing. I'm not saying that right.
Digital Legend Publishing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he's located in Salt Lake, and he's a good friend, and he has been wonderful. This is a publisher that you can work with, and you don't have to have 5,000, 10,000 books published at one time. It's on demand.
Yes.
So if the store buys it and they have an order for 10, they'll print 10. If they have an order for 2, they print 2. and then you get royalty without having to put out a great deal of money to have this happen. And
Yes.
it's been my pleasure to get acquainted with him. And of course, Sarah is one of the authors that he is promoting. And these books, this one, Waiting in the Wings, is in Deseret Book and on Amazon, right?
It will be very
Well, yeah,
soon.
it just came off the press, but it's on the
Mm-hmm.
way. It's being shipped. And we're going to talk about it today because when I met Sarah, they had a mock up copy of this at the time. And I was just so excited about it. I thought, this is really good information. And you're right, it does open doors for people that have had feelings, promptings. They didn't know really what they were experiencing. Now, the LDS community does know. We do
Mm-hmm.
believe in a pre existence very strongly. So I'm interested because you and I didn't have the time. The booth was busy and we didn't have time to really discuss this book. So I've invited you to come because I want to know about this
Mm-hmm.
book and I want to share it with friends in the listening and viewing audience. So I would like to go just a little bit into your background. How did you start writing? Where did you start writing? And all that kind of stuff.
Well, that's a good question. I was a very busy mother of 9 children.
Oh, I didn't know you had
I
nine.
have 9.
Oh, my word, girl.
We also, over the years, had 9 or more foster children and foster families, and we did a lot in the home. And none of these people came through any agency. They just kind of came through friends of our children. So I was really into mothering. And then I began to have these kind of experiences where you realize that God is giving you a work to do aside from the family. And what my work I felt that I was being given was to write books that would change hearts, soften hearts toward unborn children, and allow thousands of children to be born who otherwise may not come to the earth. Now, that was a very sobering and impossible assignment.
I started to say you like, but it wasn't like you didn't have anything else to do with your time. We all have said, I feel like I have a book in me, and we do, but most of us don't know how to sit down and write it.
Yes.
So I want to know what you did mechanically and physically. I mean, you have 9 children plus other children running around, a husband, a house
A
full,
house plant, everything. Everything takes
everything
energy.
that took your energy up. And so, what finally, because I know there are people that I have known that they want to write, they've got things to say. In fact, the people I've had on the show, unbeknownst to me in some cases, have written books, and I had met them in other circumstances, thought they would be interesting to bring on. And I'm finding more and more people are becoming more adventuresome and brave, more brave about writing their story,
Mhm.
which I'm so grateful for. So tell us, what did you do? Clean off the kitchen table?
Well, I was a pure novice. I kept reminding the Lord, I'm not a writer, and you got the wrong girl. But that didn't work either. So this was my very simple approach, and it worked. It was kind of like eating an elephant one bite at a time,
Oh my.
in that I would pray. I had my notepad. Okay, what do I do today to start this book? And I was given ideas and impressions. Well, you need to write letter to an editor, small town newspapers throughout the United States, Canada, and tell them what you're searching for, the kind of information, the kind of story, kind of information. And so I did that. I put flyers around.
Wait, what did it say? Because you were pre-birth experience,
Yes.
pre-existence.
Mm-hmm.
And so your letter simply asked, was it that simple? Have you had any stories come to you about pre-existence or babies that are impressions, or what did you ask?
Well, I had a picture of one of my babies on it to let
Okay.
them know I was talking about children. And then I asked if they'd had dreams or visitations or experiences with a child before birth, before conception, and having the spirit of that child uh, come into their life in some way. Either through, some people have it through telepathy, it can come through hearing a voice. Um, we heard a wonderful story just in LDS Journal Conference a few weeks ago, told by Elder Anderson, about the gentleman whose wife had just had her 6th child. And he was thrilled. He went to the nursery to see this beautiful little girl. And while he was looking at her, he heard a voice say, "There will be one more. It will be a boy." And he said that he uh, picked the wrong time to tell his wife, and it was 5 minutes later.
After she'd just given birth.
But then a few years later, that little boy came. So that was a pre birth experience. And so it can come in a deja vu, in many different ways. Our senses can have that experience. So I explained that in my letter to the editors, and I started getting some stories in. But I had felt that Heavenly Father had promised me that if I did my part, that He would do His part. And so that miraculously enough stories came together that I did publish my first book, Life Before Life.
Oh my.
Yeah.
And how did that do?
It did quite well. It was in all, all Deseret bookstores, um, and it became a tool to collect more
I
stories.
have to ask again, is it still available?
It's out of print
It's
right
out of
now.
print.
And then I published the second book, Coming from the Light, and that title comes from the Nag Hammadi text, where Thomas the apostle was recording the Savior teaching during his 40 days after the resurrection. The Savior taught a select few during that time before he ascended to heaven, and he taught them about preexistence in more detail. And so that was one of the things that Christ, the apostle, said, "Lord, where do we tell the people that we come from?" And the Savior said, "Tell them that you come from the light and you are the children of the living Father."
And that's the one that Simon Schuster
Simon and
published.
Schuster bought
Published.
the paperback rights to Coming from the Light, and I had to go give talks in New York City and all sorts of exciting places, and I grew a lot. It
You
was
do.
exciting.
You
Yeah.
do. Along with the people growing and understanding. All right.
Yes.
So again, I want to talk about the get started with this little book. But you didn't tell us how you sat down and cleared the table. I still have to know that because that's a huge step. That's the big one for me, is finding making the time, because you're not ever going to find it. You make it.
Yes, but I had a compelling, burning testimony that this was something I needed to do, and it was bigger than me, and it was not about me. It was about the work of changing hearts toward unborn children. And so every day I would find time, maybe nap time or maybe 4 a.m. or something, to kneel before my Heavenly Father and say, "What do I do today?" And I would be given impressions. I would write them down, and then I would get to work and do them. And when that was done, I would go back and get my marching orders and do that. And the personal impressions came to me, and I was able to put a book together. And for me, that was very, very remarkable. Really a
It is
miracle.
remarkable.
Yeah.
But I think you have to be in a frame of mind, and you have to have this incredible desire to really do the Lord's work in your way, in a pleasing manner to Him,
Yes.
to make this come together. And I have heard from, of course, that day in the booth when we were at the LDS Booksellers, that this is an absolutely beautiful story. Absolutely. Waiting in the Wings, Heaven and Our Real Home. Heaven is our real home, waiting in the wings. And so let's do talk about this. And maybe I should ask: is there a reason for the pre-birth subject? Personally, was this something, or just it came along just as you were having children and running into people that didn't have, or as we all became so aware in the 80s of abortion and how easy it became for people? Certainly many of us clutched when we would
Mm-hmm.
hear that, and feel for the people involved.
Yes.
So, what brought you to the pre-birth experience to want to share and talk about, or do you feel it was given to you? Maybe I should
Well,
ask it
I,
that
I
way.
feel that the books kind of chose me. I had never really sat down and thought about it. It was one of those experiences where authors say, the subject chose me. But personally, I had had some very special experiences with several of my children before birth, before conception. I had three miscarriages, and I had prayed and sought answers with those experiences, and I had understanding come to me about those spirits, and that my first one, my daughter had appeared to me in dreams, beautiful woman with long dark hair and dark eyes, and she called me mother, but she was apprehensive. I could see it in the dream, and so I miscarried. But later the dreams returned, and she promised to come. And so I conceived again, and our Sarah Rebecca did come, with much drama, which is written about in Waiting in the Wings. It was much drama to get her here, but now she's here, and a beautiful mother of two children, and expecting her third, her first little girl. So these personal experiences I collected and kept in my heart, but it was as if the Lord was saying, I want you to bear that testimony of these experiences, and I want you to bear your testimony of me, that we are children of God, and that these children that come into these families are the jewels. These are the precious jewels of life. So encourage and bear your testimony of these principles and collect these stories of others. And Pat, so many of the stories have come from people of a variety of cultures, a variety of
You
religions.
mentioned that, and I
Mm-hmm.
find that really, really interesting. We tend to believe we're different, but at our core, the majority of people have many of the same experiences. We have that understanding of what most of them are
Yes,
because of our basic belief in the gospel. But so many don't have that, and yet they have the experiences because they're good people
absolutely.
and they have those. So, this book then is a collection of stories, or you have written about the stories?
It is a collection. I try to keep the stories in the person's own voice. I do make editing changes. I have some of my personal stories in there. The book covers kind of the whole life spectrum, pre existence, earth life, and then post mortal. And the foundation of the book is Heaven is Our Home. I've worked in hospice and had the opportunity to sit by the bedside of a few people who've passed, including my mother. And a common phrase spoken near the time of death is, I'm ready to go home. Well, home is a place we've been before. So, in my work with the International Association of Near Death Studies, out of the University of North Carolina now, um, they collect case studies of near death experiences worldwide. And so many, many people who do pass over, to the other side know that they have come home. So when I have a chance to lecture to national audiences, it's very touching when people will come up to me and say, I always thought I was a child of God, but now you've taught me that I really am.
Wow, that's great.
And that is touching.
I'm going to read some of your. By the way, what does this sell for? Do we know? I
I
don't
think
remember.
1695.
16.95,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a very nice paperback. Is that what you call it, or they have a
Yes.
different title for that now? I don't know. And your first chapter is Waiting in the Wings. So you lay down the foundation, and then you go before birth, what? And then the parent child connection, the adoption connection, the promise to be a family, 12 truths about humans, God, and the purpose of life. Oh, that should be good.
Yeah.
Remembering souls waiting in the wings. Can we talk about that?
Sure.
Okay, and then there's another one called Spiritual Signposts Along the Cosmic Beltway, and the Truth Summary. But I'm going to go back up here as I just Remembering Souls Waiting in the Wings. That's an intriguing title. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that? And that has nothing to do with the questions I was going to ask you, except that it's an intriguing chapter.
Well, yes. And The power of the books is very interesting to me in that each person that reads the books, a particular story will touch their heart in a personal way, in a way that they are dealing with a crisis or seeking for comfort for a miscarriage or a lost family member. Or not, it's not lost, excuse me, someone who's passed away. And the stories themselves will will tie them into that heavenly connection. But I think the major part of that chapter um, is an experience that I had when I was invited by an Arizona legislator to speak at a meeting for Arizona legislators who were considering banning partial birth abortion in Arizona. And she thought that my research could shed some light on those who were planning to vote to support it. And so I went to the meeting and originally had 30 minutes, but as those things go, I ended up with 7 minutes.
Oh my.
So I
What do you
put
say in 7 minutes? That's a huge subject.
I put my notes down actually and went up to the podium with a prayer in my heart. And I had just seen the movie actually on video, but Schindler's List,
Mm-hmm.
where the great Schindler in Germany um, took it upon himself to save Jews from the concentration camp. And he was able to save thousands of Jews from being killed. And at the end of his life, he cried because he said, I wish I'd saved more. And so I challenged the legislators that they need to be Schindlers to the unborn.
Ooh.
They need to step up
Yeah,
and
good.
do that. And then I shared some stories from the book, and the final story I shared was a little story of a little 3-year-old child who had drowned in the family swimming pool, and he was resuscitated, and he began to talk, and he said, "Mommy, I met my brother. I was in heaven and I saw my brother." And the mommy said, "You don't have a brother?" And he said, "Yes, I do, Mommy. He said that he was pulled from your tummy when you were only 14 years old."
Oh my goodness.
Now, she had had an abortion, had never told her parents, her husband, had never told a soul. But this little boy had met his little brother who had been aborted on the other side. Well, with that story and the others I told, eyes became moist.
I'm sure.
The emotion was in the room. They knew that they were on target, that they had a role to play. And
So
so
these legislators
these were legislators
in Arizona.
in Arizona. And so I finished my talk. I gave or sold away some books and went home. Well, a few days later, my friend, the legislator, Congressman Johnson, called and she said, we took the vote today and we banned partial birth abortion in Arizona. And she said, Sarah, it was because of what they're talking about, a 7-minute miracle.
Wow.
There was a lady who gave a talk, and that 7-minute miracle changed enough hearts to ban that. And I said, thank you. And I hung up. And 2 days later, I called her back and I said, did you say what I thought you said? Because to me, a housewife, a mother, um, I couldn't believe that one person could make a difference like that.
We're talking to Sarah Hinze. I'm talking to Sarah Hinze. You're listening and watching. If you're on 1480 AM, KHQN, we appreciate your being here and listening with us. And if you're on pat.utahvalleylive.com, then you're on the internet, and we're grateful that you are there. Sarah, I'm going to ask you if you'll give out a email address and a phone number so that people can contact you, because your subject really does pull at the heartstrings. I think you've had some amazing experiences, that one in particular, to change people's mind in 7 minutes. You certainly know that others were in the room with you that you couldn't see.
Oh,
They were
absolutely.
influencing and and we're concerned about this particular subject, and how grateful I am that you've gone on to write about it and to talk about it and share it with people. So let's give out a website. We're going to give a website first.
My website is my name, Sarah, Sarah, Hinze, HINZE.com. And my easy email is shinze@juno.com.
Okay. Is there a phone number?
Yes, 480 882 8364.
Let's give the phone number again.
480 882 8364. I'd love to hear from you. If you have an interest, a comment, or a story, I'd love to hear from you.
Now, I wrote down something a little bit different for an email.
There's several harder emails that I could give you that are
What was
very
it? S.
long.
Hinze at Juno. That was the easiest
My
one.
easy one is S. Hinze, and it's all lowercase, one word. Think of shines, but it's S. Hinze.
S. Hinze. H-E-I-N. No, H. Go for it.
Yes, SHINZE at juno.com.
Okay.
And if you Google my name or Google pre-birth studies, I will come up, Sarah Hinze.
are you one of the few researchers that has taken this on, and then you looped into others that were also interested in this, maybe for different reasons, like at the University of North Carolina?
Well, I did coin the term pre-birth experience, and I was impressed at the time that many other scholars, researchers would jump on board and research it. And if you're a researcher, you're really delighted when others want to do that. And I communicate with several of them, and have seen many of the books. The thing that many of them don't get, and this is one of my rally cries, is the concept of pre-existence. The philosophy of pre-existence needs to be really brought back in a major way, and that's one of my quests, because they often think it's rebirth or reincarnation. And I heard a wonderful story about a dear man by the name of David O. McKay. And the story goes that he was on an airplane and talking to the lady next to him, and she asked him, well, in your church, do you believe in reincarnation? And he said, well, we call it pre-existence, and let me tell you about it.
Ah.
And I love that approach. That's the correct approach. Because if people don't have the knowledge, they don't understand. But they know that they're eternal. Many people know they're eternal. But now in the near-death studies, I have been endorsed by many of those who are esteemed, such as Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the great doctor who founded hospice in America and wrote the book on death and dying, which changed the way we deal with the dying. And Dr. Ross, I met with her in her home in Scottsdale, and my husband and I traveled there, and I told her about my books, my manuscript. She passed away several years ago, but I told her what I was writing, what I was doing, and she said, oh yes, you're writing about the announcing dream, which is
The announcing dream?
the announcing dream is known throughout cultures as occurring worldwide. These are the children announcing they're coming. And then I talked to her about little children who remember their life in heaven. Some adults do still. But when she was very fond of these stories of the little children speaking about their life in heaven, and she said, usually by the time they're 5, they become earthbound. But yes, parents need to listen to the little ones.
I haven't thought of this in a long time, but when my daughter was about 3, almost 4, we had walked out the parking lot. We were living in Southern California in the Westwood Beverly Hills area, and the Ward Chapel is right close to where the temple is, the Los Angeles temple, just to the back part of the property. and she had walked out a little bit ahead of me, and I could see her. And suddenly she stood still, and I could see her looking at a man. And I'm hoping this is the right name. Andre Liarde, I think, was his name in the Westwood Ward. And she stood very still. And then she turned around and just ran back towards me. And I thought, oh, did he say something to her? Because she was just flying. And then she was laughing. And I said, what? What? And I knelt down next to her, and she said, Jesus was right over there. And she pointed, and I said, honey, and I gave her the name, and I said, he's a member of our ward, our community here. No, he looks just like Jesus. I think it's him. And she was so determined. And I thought, she's seen him. She remembers.
Yes.
She remembers what Christ looked like. Well, um, amazing, truly an amazing moment. So I have always felt that, and somehow always known that there was pre-existence from the time I was a child. But when your children then play it back to you as children, oh
Yes.
my goodness, how wonderful is that?
Very,
So,
very, very special.
well, so do you have, are you working with researchers in an ongoing situation, or, um, and
Yes.
how do I ask the question? Are they, the ongoing information is just more information of the same, of similar patterns that people really do come back and forth through the veil on occasion, or they have impressions of what's coming
I was
to
very
them?
excited a couple of years ago to have a phone call from a professor at Northern Arizona University uh, on campus in Phoenix, and she said that she's doing her dissertation on the announcing dreams and has been using a great deal of my material in her dissertation work. And so when we got together, she really shared with me more what's going on academically in the studies.
Well, that's
And
interesting. What is going on?
well, there's an amazing area of research that I apparently began in my book, The Castaways, that was published in 2000.
Now, you haven't mentioned that one.
Yes. Well,
The
the
castaways.
castaways, and that's a term I call the aborted ones
Mm.
because they are not allowed to go to the land of their choosing, which is Earth. And
Hmm.
so they're sent back. And there is ongoing research on this. She mentioned a scholar in France and others who are collecting these case studies of children and adults who remember having been aborted. And then, Plan B comes into effect. They're back, and but they're having anxiety and flashbacks and this kind of thing.
You mean they're born? They come again?
They come again to another family or another generation. I've learned that every individual soul has an individual plan.
Well, that makes sense, because if they weren't able to come originally, they don't die.
Yeah.
That wouldn't happen. Yeah, that makes sense. I haven't thought about it.
Yes, it's
What happens to spirits that are aborted
well,
for one reason or another?
I know, I'm like picking up some grains of sand on the seashore and reflecting back what I know. I don't know a lot about the whole seashore, but I know through the stories that apparently some souls are they go to a place. Now, a friend of mine has seen in her near-death experience what she called the reassigned children's area, where children are taken, where they are comforted by the Savior. They go through some kind of healing process as best they can, and then there is a reassignment for them to come back. And they come back, they come to the earth eventually. That's why we hear the stories. I think that many of those who are aborted will come in the millennium. There'll be a great opportunity for them to come. But I guess the idea is that there is some chaos in heaven dealing with the unborn souls because of all the abortion and all the things that are going on worldwide massively to prevent Heavenly Father's children from coming. I've done a lot of research on China,
I was
and
just, I just that had that thought flash right through my mind.
yeah,
What has gone on there from the government?
I'm going to be putting a link to a video on my website in the next few days from a wonderful lady who works in China. But you can only have a child if you have a birth permit. One child policy is still in effect. People are imprisoned or tortured if they have more children, if they're found. Women are forced into abortions, and it's just a very tragic situation for the unborn there in that huge country.
Mm. You've really tackled something, didn't you? I mean, you could be just sitting on a porch rocking and taking care of grandchildren, right?
Yes, I still like to bake cookies for them, but I'm very passionate about helping people understand that the unborn are our brothers and sisters, and they don't have a voice, but they are crying out for to be heard and to be loved and respected.
Well, that makes sense. It does make sense. What are you planning on doing? I mean, how far is this going to go? And which is not one of your questions, but I've gone through the research, and I want to hear more of your stories. I do want us to spend some time here before you go away about some of your stories, and then I want to hear about your foundation that you've created, which I don't know where I've heard about it, but I heard about it before you mentioned it to me last week. And so I want to wind up with that. And then also how your husband fits into all of this in any event. And then what are you doing in the future? And you can pick any one of those and start with it.
Well, whatever the Lord will help me do is what I'm doing. I'm very passionate about a mission, but I'm also realistic. I try to keep a balance because I have a family, I have grandchildren. That's my core. But this is a work that I have that God has given me. So I felt that I needed a foundation because you've heard the subject. Well, you're doing this, but so what? So
Right.
what does it mean? So what importance does it do?
Are you just selling books?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just selling books. No,
But
you're not actually.
the foundation highlights the work that and the changes that it's affecting in lives. And I could tell you stories forever about that. But also we have kind of mapped out a documentary that we'd like to raise the money to do a documentary. And Paul Thomas Smith, who's a filmmaker, he's on the board of the Joseph and Emma Smith Foundation, and his son Brandon is also a filmmaker, and they are our team, along with our board members, to plan out and put together a documentary on the pre-birth studies, to bring in this dear Terrell Gibbons. I don't know you if you're listening, but I love your book, When Souls Have Wings, because he has put together a very scholarly approach from Oxford University about the whole philosophy of preexistence.
He's not LDS.
I think he might be.
He might be.
He might be.
That's interesting. I do want to mention some of these other people if I could, because
Yes.
they're your board members: Paul Thomas Smith, Brandon Smith, his son, and then Mark and Debbie Cross, and Kathy Fowlks, Richard and Kelly Lowry,
Correct.
and Ted Hines, who is your
Son.
son. And it's really a mission statement. It's about 3 pages long. So I don't want to read it all, but would you pick out some part of it that you're comfortable with sharing? Because you have really bitten off a huge chunk by writing the books in the first place. It's not a subject you can just sit down and write in any mood. You sort of have to get there. And as you say, you're being guided. And so it's constantly, you have to be in a mode to be receptive to the promptings that are given to you. And then on top of that, you created, is it a 501c3 nonprofit? Or
No,
is it,
according to one of our board members who works for a law firm, we have not done that yet, but we may go ahead and do it. He mentioned there are so many complications in that I may not be ready for that step, but
Well,
whatever I.
if you're trying to raise money for a documentary, it
Mhm.
might be easier to do it outside, depending
Mhm.
on all the legalities are involved. But I thought your mission statement should be read and shared with us. When I was working with Steve Covey, he had each one of us write a mission statement. And then some years later, I went through some impact training and wrote a different kind of mission statement. And this one is even, um, it encompasses, but it's a little bit different. And I think it's worth sharing. Would you mind reading that for us?
Thank you. Changing hearts toward all children and toward people everywhere throughout the world, born and unborn, through sharing research of the pre-birth studies and the knowledge that we are literally the children of God, sent to this earth by divine appointment. We are active in safeguarding the sanctity of life and strengthening the family unit.
You know, it's almost like you're on a continuing mission. When did this all really come together? The writing and then wanting to have the foundation and then talking about a documentary, a docudrama. Um, is it recent? I know this book that we're talking about, Waiting in the Wings, Heaven is Our Real Home, is the book is not wet, it's dry, but it's just barely dry. It came off the press this week.
This book, Waiting
So
in the Wings, was kind of in preparation, and then I had an incredible email from ABC News in New York about 4 or 5 months ago, and a phone number I called. This was an intern, a research assistant who had contacted me because of the pre-birth studies, and she said, "You're obviously the pioneer, and we are preparing various stories, specials, whatever, on many spiritual topics, and we want to do one on the pre-birth studies." Well, after I got off the ceiling and I jumped up there, um, I said, "Oh, goody," and I probably acted silly, but we have been in contact, and I've sent her material, and she has my books, and she said, "Now be patient. I don't know where this will go, but it's my boss's call, but so I'm that's why Boyd recommended we prepare a book.
we're talking about Boyd Tuttle,
Boyd Tuttle,
the publisher.
a man of great integrity. And I love working with him. I told Boyd, well, God picked you, so that's who I'm working with. But he recommended we do this new book where we really bring together the best of the studies, the new information. Where if I do get a call to be on Good Morning America, that I will have a book. But if we have a chance to really highlight the material in a major way, so this book is
I'm just thinking of how many minds will open up, at least to the possibility of a pre-existence that
yeah.
have heretofore believed that it was just a recycling. You came one time as one person, another time as another person, and they finally get some of the straight facts.
Yeah.
I know I was a child in South Carolina growing up, and we had a little ward chapel. Really, it was a branch at the time. And I remember hearing music. The one, well, this my aunties. One played the piano, one led the music, and it was a one-room little building. And oh, my father, the first time I thought I've heard this before, and I could not have heard it before. I had grown up in other religions in North Carolina because there was not a group to meet with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and so there was no way in the world I could have heard that song, and yet I knew it. And I knew that I knew it, and I knew I had heard it. Well, that's happened many times since. But I know other people that think they came back in some royal fashion or one way or another, and they really believed in reincarnation rather than pre-existence, and to finally get the truth out and have it in a format where the whole world can hear it through
Mm-hmm.
NBC, CBS, or whatever it might be,
Yeah.
or through this
Through
meeting
your show
here, through the
today.
show.
Absolutely.
And that's really one of my goals, is to bring more people that I have met that I feel have interesting information to share. This list that you have of our goals, your particular goals for this group, and it's called Changing Hearts Foundation. Changing Hearts Foundation. Your husband has his PhD in
Psychology.
psychology. And so the two of you probably work very well together.
Oh, yes. I'm so grateful for him. I tease him, and that's why I married him, but also that I love him. But he adds a completeness to the work. I collect the stories. He calls me his bird dogger because I collect the stories. I meet with the people. And I put it together. And he puts together the research angle of it, which we have 2 chapters in the back of Waiting in the Wings of his contributions. We have an analysis and characteristics of a pre-birth experience and that sort of thing that are similar to a near-death experience, but unique in communicating or receiving that from the pre-existence.
Could I say that he's perhaps more analytic in his
Absolutely.
approach and
Yes.
fact wise,
Yes.
perhaps, than some of us would be,
Yes.
which is a nice balance. But this is a good list of goals. And when I saw this, I thought, why don't you read these out loud for us? Because you know what? This is good for anybody to have. Changing Hearts Foundation has adopted these and adapted them into their organization, but I think it would not hurt us all to think about making our own list of goals, and certainly these are some good ones.
Thank you. Well, our goals in Changing Heart Foundations are teach that we are the children of God. You don't know how humbling it is to give a lecture and have someone come up to you and say, I now I know that I am a child of God. Thank you for teaching me that. Teach the principle of preexistence. Before birth, we lived in a heavenly home with our Heavenly Father. We have been sent to this earth at this time to fulfill assignments chosen there. We have been sent here to succeed. Change the hearts of those planning to abort a child. Heal the hearts of those who have aborted a child. The Savior loves those women and wants them to be healed. Provide perspective in adoption decisions. Many of our stories, these unborn children are visiting the parents that will adopt them. And this is a remarkable, miraculous occurrence. Comfort those who have lost children to miscarriage or death. Increase desires to bear and love children. Reduce fears and increase joy in the miracle of childbearing. Increase gratitude for children and family. Affect votes on abortion issues at state and national levels. Magnify appreciation for the sanctity of life.
And I'm going to go ahead and read this. Changing Hearts Foundation provides an educational forum for teaching and sharing with the community the powerful bonds between parents and their children, born and unborn. It is our mission and great desire to minister to men and women about the power and majesty of the human spirit. Wow, you got it all there.
Yeah.
So, if they want to get involved, people would like to get involved with this foundation, how can they do that?
Well, you can email me on my website, which is, of course, you got the www dot and my name, Sarah, Sarah, Hinze, Hinze.com. Google pre-birth studies. If you can't remember that, my name, Sarah Hinze, will always come up, usually at the top. And we feel that.
Let me give you your phone number.
Thank you.
It's 480, area 480-882-8364, area 480, which is Arizona,
Correct.
882-8364. Now, you're not there right now, so what happens if they call? Or is that your cell phone?
That's my cell.
That's your cell.
And I will definitely love to hear from you.
Okay.
And by purchasing these books and sharing them with others, I had a phone call a few months ago, a lady I had given a book to in Washington, D.C., and she called me and said, I gave that book to my neighbor's daughter who was planning to have an abortion, and she changed her mind. She had the baby and gave it up for adoption. By purchasing the books, sharing them with others, we are available to speak at civic, community, or church functions. We're also open to receive donations as we are planning our documentary.
I think that's wonderful. I also want to thank Kyani Products, the Kyani Company, which is located in Idaho Falls. And I am right here in Provo. And again, I want to thank Sarah for being in our community at this time. It worked out great to have you on the air with me on the broadcast. And again, the Kyani products have made it possible for me to be here. I was sick for a long time, 4 years. Or 14 years. I was really dragging around and pushing against the ball. I was always pushing the ball uphill. I didn't ever quite feel right. And getting on these products has balanced my entire body, and I really love the energy I have, the health I have. And somebody asked me how long I hadn't been sick. I haven't had a cold. I sneeze occasionally if you dust right all over me. Then I sneeze, but I haven't been sick at all. I feel great. It's my testimony of these products working. Do they work for everybody? They can. If you have something more serious, then you double up on the products. I'm not a doctor, so I can't say what will happen for your body, but there is always the possibility that you will certainly feel better. The company does guarantee the product. If at the end of 30 days you feel that these three products have not helped you in any way, they return your money. You return the bottles, they return your money to you. And you can't find that on a prescription. Try that with a doctor and it won't work. And so I'm very proud to be part of this company. And I don't know if you heard or not, but I've worked hard for 14 months in the company, and I have been CEO of a number of network marketing companies where there were supplements. I've owned my own supplement to herbal company. And so I've been around around product sales and around network marketing for many, many years. Never managed to make more than about $500 a month. And for that, you don't get very much. Well, this company started a little incentive last month. If you reach the third rank, which puts you somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 a month, if you reach that and you maintain it for several months and then you maintain it thereafter, but after 2 months, they give you a $40,000 Audi.
Wow.
And I just got one. Yes. So there you are.
Congrats.
So we're working on the paper to get all of that filled out, but they will pay for it. And then they pay the 500 a month. They pay the $1,000 down. And after the car is paid for in 38, 48 months, whatever you set up, they continue sending you $500 as long as you maintain the rank of Sapphire, which is not hard to get to. And I've never worked with a company where the owners were all millionaires. And in one case, well, you put them all together and they're worth billions. They're very successful in their own companies and then came together because, like so many of you, you have missions, and they knew this was a mission for them. They found the products, they found a tribe that had been living on blueberries from Alaska and sockeye salmon. They found a formula for a product that changes, literally melts the plaque in your body and your brain so that you think faster, smarter, and in all ways you are better. Truly, I retired from radio about 7 years ago because I realized I wasn't thinking on my feet as fast. And now I'm just going all the time. And I said the other day, okay, I've got two shows, and okay, we can only do four. So no, we're not going to, but I do feel very, very complete. And it's wonderful to wake up every day and feel the same, not be up or down. And I'm probably not ever going to see 50 again, nor 60, nor some other numbers out there. so, so it's been great. And we can talk more about that if you'll call on 801-362-9552. And Sarah, if you've got a couple of stories that you could continue sharing, her book is Waiting in the Wings. It just came off the press. It will be at Desert Book. It will be on Amazon. It sells for about $16. Waiting in the Wings, Heaven is Our Real Home. I know you cannot see the picture, but it is a little boy and a little girl walking towards the light, holding hands. And Sarah Hinze, Hinze, is the author. And I thought that's all that she was about. I thought she was just an author. And oh my goodness, you're so much more than that. And you, with raising 9 children of your own and others that came to live with you, you must have grandchildren and great grandchildren abounding.
21 grandchildren, 2 more are coming. They tend to come in litters because they like to have them together. So every 2 years, they all have one. So we will have 50 very soon, I think.
Oh, that's exciting. That is exciting. Well, see, I can't compare with that, but I have a set of twin boys, great grandsons, and I've got another set of twins coming in the spring.
Yeah.
And there's some others, so I've got 7 great grandchildren now.
Bless you.
Yes, it's true.
Yes.
And I'm loving every minute of it. And you would think I had something to do with it. All right, let's talk about we've got about 4 minutes left. So
Okay.
let's talk about one of these stories, if you could, that is a favorite of yours.
Well, I've had some from celebrities that I've heard them talk about on television. One of the most remarkable was Richard Dreyfuss was on a Barbara Walters special, and this was during the time he was preparing to he was nominated for the Oscar. And she wanted to talk to him about the movie and everything, but he only wanted to talk about one thing, and it was a pre-birth experience that he had had that he was trying to get an understanding about. But what had happened to him, he had been into drugs and alcohol and had had a car accident, had gone to the hospital, and while he was detoxing, a little girl kept appearing to him. And she would walk in through the door, she would come up to his bed, and day after day this would happen. He came to understand that this was his unborn daughter. And he said, I can only say I knew that by something deep inside. But once he understood that, because her appearance made him want to be a better man, he poured out all his alcohol and became sober. And he said the day he made the decision to become sober, she didn't come back, but she was born a few years later.
Oh, my.
And he just says, this is a little girl. She's now the same, she's now beyond the age that he saw her, because she was about a little 5-year-old girl. But he found it so remarkable. Well, it is life-changing. There's a fabulous story many people may have read, Between a Rock and a Hard Place. Aaron Ralston's story became a movie, award-winning movie. But he was the young man who fell into a cavern in one of the Utah canyons. An
He severed his arm.
800-pound boulder fell on his arm. 4 or 5 days later, he knew he was dying. He'd had a thought of cutting off his arm, but he just couldn't bear doing it. But he had a vision, and it was a vision of a little boy that he was up on his shoulders, and he was carrying this little boy around. He noticed that he only had one hand. He had one hand and a stump. And this little boy compelled him to cut off that hand. And now that little boy is here.
I don't know the rest of the story, so here's the rest of
the rest of the story, and I've heard it on television various ways. The little boy, he married his girlfriend Jessica. They had the little boy, and he says, now he's here. He changed everything for me.
Because he would have died.
He would have died. That is a story that Tom Brokaw did a special on. And not everyone caught that the root of the story was not so much cutting off the hand, but the vision of the unborn child that really that made the catalyst for the change.
Are you open to people sharing stories with you still?
Oh, absolutely, always.
Are talking with you about it, and are being able to send stories to you? Are you open to that?
I have a blog. My publisher has encouraged me to blog, and I hear stories wherever I go. I have so many new stories. I gave a talk a few nights ago, and I heard probably 10 new stories. I would love to hear from you.
Let's give your blog.
My blog is just my website.
Okay.
Go to my website at Sarah Hinze, SarahHinze.com, and you'll see Sarah's blog. And just click on that. I've just started it. I have a couple of stories up.
Good.
But I plan to blog. Hopefully I can blog daily or every other day.
Sarah Hinze, thank you for being with us. Thank you as an audience for being with us today. We appreciate you. We appreciate Kent Borkink, who owns Utah Valley Live. I'm Pat Sheranian. Grateful to have you with us. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you and see you on Monday.